I made a video a couple days ago about how union electricians in Maine screwed themselves over by voting for Donald Trump. No sooner did Trump take office than he started slashing all of these Biden-era programs that had provided a ton of work for skilled union tradespeople, including electricians building solar panels. Not only did Trump cancel all kinds of important programs like these clean energy programs that these electricians relied on for their employment, but he's also declined to pay out money that was already promised to communities through Biden's infrastructure bill. Funding that was necessary for rural communities all over this country. I talked about Coos Bay and the infrastructure money that is not being delivered there. That was going to hire so many skilled union workers, so many for all kinds of fields. And now all of those folks are out of work. And in that video, I was lamenting, like, God, union folks, they voted against their own interests. And a lot of people in my comments were like, well, racism is expensive. And we saw one of the gentlemen who was interviewed was like, yeah, I am an electrician. I voted for Trump because I agreed with his immigration policy. How's that construction business working out now with all those immigration raids, all of those very efficient, hardworking folks who are being snatched up by ICE and stuffed into concentration camps? How's that working out for the construction industry? So on that video, I appreciated this comment from Captain Howdy. I'm the wife of a union worker. Biden was the most pro-labor president ever. He was the only president to ever join a picket line. Unfortunately, a lot of people join the union just for the money, not for the part of the fight for all working people. So I actually spent a little time digging up information on Joe Biden's labor record. Also, who union workers voted for in the last election, who unions endorsed, and like, what is any member of a union doing voting for Donald Trump? I know that he really pulled the wool over a lot of folks' eyes and he tried to make them think that he was a populist. Why any person who's part of the labor movement, why any union worker would think that a billionaire who has a long track record of not paying his electricians, his landscapers, his contractors, his construction workers, why you would think that he is somebody that you can trust to care about working class people. Why would you assume that a billionaire has any interest in protecting workers' rights? The super rich are all about exploiting the working class. They are the reason that we had to make unions in the first place, y'all. I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that so many union workers in this country voted for and support Donald Trump. They are supporting their own oppression. They voted to take away their own jobs and to be exploited harder by the super rich because they bought this lie that Donald Trump was a populist who cared about them. But also, I think this is a really interesting point here. I mean, we've seen an intentional weakening of the labor movement in this country for a number of decades because as the oligarchy really has gained more and more control, as we've had Citizens United, as we have had much more corporate influence in our government, we are seeing the weakening of the labor movement. We saw, I think it was in Idaho earlier this year. I just went and looked it up. It's not only Idaho, it's also Utah, that have banned their firefighters from collective bargaining. They went after the firefighters union, y'all, in these states. And yet so many of these firefighters voted for Donald Trump. So many of these firefighters voted for the Republican members of their state legislature because racism is expensive, because they don't understand that the Republicans are a party that is absolutely in opposition to the labor movement, is absolutely in opposition to workers' rights. Y'all, Donald Trump was backed by Elon Musk, and y'all knew it. And Elon Musk calls all of y'all the parasite class. He calls all of us the parasite class. He sees workers as parasites. He sees them as only having one job, and that is to make money for the billionaires, to live in servitude of the billionaires. And y'all thought that that guy who spent $250 million on Donald Trump, you thought that those two dudes had your best interest at heart. So I do think there is a bit of a misperception that unions all across America endorsed Donald Trump, but that's not true. The vast majority of unions endorsed Kamala Harris publicly. Now, the Teamsters, I believe, chose not to endorse anybody. The Teamsters were the only one of the nation's 10 largest unions not to endorse Kamala Harris. There are about 1.3 million Teamsters in the United States, and in their initial union voting, they wanted to support Joe Biden over Donald Trump. About 36.5% of Teamsters voted to support Donald Trump. But then when Kamala Harris got in the race, it kind of gummed things up because, again, These guys didn't want to vote for a black woman, even though she worked as part of an administration that was overwhelmingly pro-labor and did so much important work for unions. The president of the Teamsters Joint Council 39 in Wisconsin said, as vice president of the most pro-union administration ever, Kamala Harris worked with the Teamsters and other union workers to pass the historic Butch-Lewis Act, which saved the pension of over 1 million retirees so far. The Wisconsin 39 said that they would work to get out the vote for Kamala Harris and defeat Donald Trump in 2024. So we saw individual union members within the Teamsters who are still absolutely supporting Kamala Harris. But it is important to note that, like, of the big unions, the Teamsters tend to go a little bit more right-leaning. In fact, the Teamsters president spoke at the Republican National Convention this year. Well, I should say last year in 2024. I mean, the Teamsters did also endorse Ronald Reagan in 80 and 84 and endorsed George H.W. Bush. While speaking at the RNC and also acknowledging that they wouldn't endorse either candidate, the Teamsters did say, yeah, Harris did pledge to sign the PRO Act, which would strengthen the rights of workers to unionize, and that Trump would not commit to protecting workers' rights and vetoing right-to-work legislation in his second term. But I think there is this false belief in this country that the unions all got behind Donald Trump. That's simply not true. Again, overwhelmingly, the unions endorsed Kamala Harris, but individual members within those unions did vote pretty significantly for Donald Trump. And I think that speaks to the weakening power of the unions in this country, the weakening influence that they have over their own members, and the way that they're not educating their members about what the labor movement is and why it's so important, what it means to stand for workers' rights, what kinds of candidates are out there to fuck over workers and exploit workers as much as they can, erode workers' rights, and what kinds of candidates support the labor movement. I think there's been a significant lack of education. And I say that as somebody whose husband is a member of a union, right? But I have family members who are, like, tool and die makers, family members who are in the Teamsters, the UAW, the UFCW. They all fucking voted for Donald Trump. It just blows my mind. I understand they are listening to Fox News and they live in a completely different reality than you or I live in, but they could not see how they were shooting themselves in the foot. And they really hated Joe Biden, despite the fact that if we look at Biden's labor report card, he is basically given the highest grade of any president since FDR when it comes to supporting unions and the labor movement. I think that's a lot of the reason that he got elected, even when we saw conservative folks who then turned around and voted for Donald Trump in 2024. They voted for Joe Biden in 2020 because they knew that he was a union guy, right? We saw a lot of those Rust Belt folks be loyal to him because he absolutely was a very pro-union candidate. Biden supported legislation that would impose significant financial penalties on companies that interfered with employees' rights to organize. He became the first president in history to walk the picket line with the UAW. During his first term, Trump made it harder for folks to get overtime pay, but Biden actually increased the cap significantly so that more folks than ever could qualify for overtime. He also created new policies for pay equity for federal workers. I could go on here, and Kamala Harris was in that administration supportive of those actions. Y'all always want to tie negative things that Biden did straight to Kamala Harris, but you never want to tie the good things that he did to Kamala Harris. So what happened? What's the disconnect? Why did so many union members go ahead and vote for Trump, even though they saw Biden do so many good things for unions, and they knew that Kamala Harris was going to continue that pathway? They wouldn't vote for a black woman. They believed the indoctrination of Fox News and, whatever Trump was telling them, they got hoodwinked. 7 out of 10 Americans strongly support unions. But the strength of the unions has been diluted over the years, and that's been intentional by the right. And Trump is doing it even more right now. Right, back in January, he gutted the National Labor Relations Board. That was his first week in office, y'all. He has been anti-labor, anti-union from day one. So when are all those union workers who supported Trump going to wake up to the fact that he doesn't give two shits about them, and actually he hopes to exploit them even more? He wants to erode their rights further. What can we do to bring those union folks back to the Democratic Party? And also, how can the Democratic Party become a party that actually supports labor once again instead of their large corporate donors? Because y'all, if we want to win, those have to be for the working class.